We have a big bounty for the big giant man, an old hairstyle for an old friend who is now on the floor, and this chapter may have subtly revealed exactly how our Shanks became an emperor of the sea. So I feel like after getting through all of the Road of the Sun Goddess stuff, Oda is starting to really shift this story into relentless gear, because we are still in the very opening of this arc, but we are being bombarded with so much. And I've got to say, all of this is heading in a very not good direction. It's all fun and games at the moment, but there is a deep darkness here waiting to be unleashed, and from here things could spiral out of control at an unbelievable rate even for One Piece. But starting with the cover story, it looks like we finally have some Yamato action happening, not because of all the kidnappings, mind you, but because Yasu's sword got stolen. Which, just as a reminder, Yamato was given Yasu's sword by Kinemon so that it can be laid to rest. I say that because every chapter without fail I get comments about Yamato's sword. Some people are only just picking up on it now. And to be fair, it's been a long time since this cover story began, so these things are easily forgotten. This is part 18, and I feel like we might be in for one of, if not the longest cover story in all of One Piece, because Yamato's pilgrimage is supposed to be across all of Wano, and at the moment we've only covered the flower capital, Kibi, and now Kuri. There is still so much left to be seen and done, and probably a lot more pages of Yamato sitting and eating with assorted people, so we've got a while to go yet. But getting into the actual chapter, we pick up exactly where we left off, and Luffy has now climbed up onto Loki's leg, which is both adorable and blasphemous. We're starting to get to know Loki a bit more, and he definitely has that classical One Piece view of being a god. This is the view that we've seen over and over again in the series, always present in those who present themselves as false deities, which is a particularly rampant attitude among the world nobles, but probably best displayed in Enel, because he's one of the few people who's had the raw power to back up his claims like it looks like Loki does. It's the idea that as a god, my rightful place is above you, which is very much displayed in Loki's whole do not speak without permission first, and silence when I'm talking to you, small rubber man. And the whole idea of Luffy climbing onto Loki reminds me of the tale of Sun Wukong when he urinated on the palm of Buddha. But Oda is setting up an immediate contrast here, because we do have this inevitable clash of sun gods coming. So we're starting to lay out the personal and philosophical differences between Luffy and Loki, but it's not as stark of a contrast as you may think, at least not at the moment, because Luffy and Loki do have some pretty bizarre similarities. For one thing, it was pretty funny that Loki got Luffy's name wrong, because that is the most Luffy-like thing he possibly could have done. Whenever he meets a new person, Luffy can never remember their names. He ends up calling them the wrong thing for a while and then settles for a nickname like how Brûlée became Branch, because it was just easier to remember her based on what she looks like. But from similarities back to contrast, we have the whole idea of Loki being born into a royal family and inheriting the title of king, which is again demonstrated in his godly attitude. This is mine by right, as opposed to what Luffy's doing, which is earning the title of king. Luffy never says, I am the king, it is my right. He says, I will be the pirate king. I will earn it. Because Luffy grew up in a small village in the middle of nowhere, whereas Loki has the infinite resources of Elbaf at his disposal. And one of the new resources available to you is the Calm Belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos, and these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, well, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. But then we have another similarity between Luffy and Loki, because I was very intrigued by their brief discussion about freedom. This is a very dangerous thing, it is that Loki says, because I can actually imagine Luffy empathizing with the desire for freedom and agreeing with Loki on a matter of principle. Everyone wants to be free, am I right, Straw Hat? You know what, actually, yeah, Mr. Bad Giant Man, you are right. Let's get right on that freedom for you. Then again, it's not like Luffy's ever been morally bound to free people. There were tons of prisoners in Impel Down who begged him to free them, but he didn't. And even when visiting a slave shop on Sabri Archipelago, Luffy didn't feel an obligation of much of anything really. He was just disappointed that Kami wasn't there. I do definitely worry about this though, because I feel like Luffy can be quite easily convinced with words. These semi-logical arguments that Luffy just doesn't have the mental capacity to refute. Or he does, and I think this is more likely to be the Luffy thought process. He does understand that because he may feel that he can free Loki, as if things get out of hand, he'll just smack him back down. That's the kind of confidence that Luffy has in his own abilities. We are seeing that throbbing confidence whipping about all over the chapter, particularly when Luffy immediately bonds with all of the fearsome beasts. And something I love here is that Luffy has such a warm feeling whilst doing this because it's not outright stated, but he's having a nostalgic flashback to the animal friends that he made training for 2 years on Rusukaina. And as he should, because this is a weird fact, Luffy has spent about 4 times as much time with those animals than he has with the Straw Hats. Those animals are much closer friends than the members of the crew. But if anyone's capable of tricking Luffy into doing something that will, very potentially cause the end of the world here, then it would be the character inspired by a Norse trickster god. Although weirdly enough, I'm actually getting some flashbacks to Blackbeard on Jaya here, because Luffy is usually capable of picking up on the bad vibes of a major antagonist pretty instantly, but there are definitely some rare cases where an antagonist will completely fly under his radar, much like how Blackbeard did at first before they had a difference in opinion over Cherry Pie. And with Blackbeard, that's because he's not a complete antithesis to Luffy. They have stark differences, as physically represented with the sun god and the darkness blob, whatever Blackbeard is. But in terms of dreams, belief, and ambition, they are scarily similar. And I have that same feeling with Loki at the moment, which gives me some fictional pirate chills. Because if Loki does turn out to be the villain that we're being led to believe he is, then he's very much more on the Blackbeard side of the antagonistic spectrum. Someone to take very seriously, and he would have to be, because at this stage for a character to be worthy of holding the title of arc antagonist, then they need to be able to top what we've seen to this point. They need to be able to top what the 5 Elder Stars and what Kaido could do, and I think seriously ideologically challenge Luffy and set him up for the final clash with Blackbeard. But Luffy also gets what the internet would describe as triggered in this chapter, when Loki starts smack-talking Shanks, and I'm kind of surprised at how immediately violent Luffy got. It was straight into a full gear forth into the face. This wasn't a warning shot. Loki had to dodge the attack, which I do think is a bit of an overreaction and very much against the philosophy set up all the way back in chapter 1 of One Piece, where Shanks really didn't mind being disrespected and being made a fool of so long as his friends weren't threatened. So it was really cool to see because we very rarely see that super serious Luffy these days. Gear 5th has kind of taken a lot of that away, but it does feel unusually trigger happy for Luffy. And I wonder if this is setting up how Loki may break free, and I really hope this isn't the case, but maybe Loki could annoy Luffy to the point where Luffy relentlessly attacks him, and Luffy's attacks, man, they're quite powersome, perhaps strong enough to break a chain or a piece of tree or something. And again, I hope not, but this does feel a little bit out of character for Luffy. Shanks has been insulted right in front of his face before, and Luffy has never gotten this worked up about it, so maybe there's a greater purpose to what's happening here. Speaking of Mr. Shanks though, what I find most interesting about this section is that Loki says that he's been chained up for 6 years. And 6 years ago was a very interesting time for the One Piece world, because 3 incredibly important events happened. The first is that Robin joined Baroque Works to assist Crocodile in finding Pluton. The second is that Frankie returned to Water 7 and received the blueprints for Pluton. Lots of ancient weapon stuff, specifically Pluton. But the third, and by far most public of events, is that 6 years ago is when Shanks officially became an Emperor of the Sea. And given that Shanks has a clear history with Loki, and that the world government are aware of and fear Loki enough to slap him with a bounty of 2.6 billion berries, maybe it was Shanks who defeated or otherwise incapacitated Loki, which prompted the world government to consider him a threat on the level of a Whitebeard, a Big Mama, or a Kaido. But also, this timeline very much fits with what we know of Lola as well, because we've never been told exactly how long ago it was that Lola rejected Loki's marriage proposal, but what we do know is that Lola arrived on Thriller Bark 5 years ago, had her shadow stolen by Gecko Moria, and then spent 3 years soldiers trying to get it back before the Straw Hats arrived and greatly assisted in their quest. I can see it taking Lola a year to travel from the New World and ending up in the Grand Line, so it's feeling like 6 years ago could have been the catalyst for everything we're seeing here. Very important year for the world, where Loki proposed to Lola and she refused, which caused her to set out on her own journey. And this rejection may even have triggered Loki's desire to end the world, which resulted in him being captured and imprisoned by Shanks, resulted in him being labeled as an Emperor of the Sea. I don't know though, I swear if Loki's whole reason for wanting to destroy the world is because he got rejected by a woman, I mean not just any woman in his eyes, it's the woman, but still, I don't know, I'm hoping there's a bit more to it than that. With what we know at the moment though, the Loki we have seen was a lovely, smiley man pre-Lola and became an instrument of the apocalypse post-Lola. And it could very well be the case that Charlotte Lola has been one of the single most important decision makers in One Piece history. Because if she married Loki and the Elbaf Giants formed an alliance with the Big Mom Pirates, then it would be similar to the alliance that Big Mom made with Kaido, if not more devastating, because the extended armies of the Giants are feared much more than the Beast Pirates, and Loki himself is being presented as an individual equitable to other Emperors of the Sea. We even see this expressed in numerical form. As mentioned before, Loki is an insane 2.6 billion berries. So the world government at least sees this guy as an Emperor level threat. And I honestly didn't think that Loki would have a bounty, just given how isolated Elbaf is. In terms of bounty rankings, we're 2 chapters into his existence, but Loki currently has the 11th highest bounty in all of One Piece, although I should note that 10th place is currently shared by 7 characters who each have a 3 billion berry bounty: Luffy, Kid, Laurel, all of the Admirals, and the Garp. You almost never see a character in the 2 billion berry range though. We often skip straight from 1 billion to 3 or 4 billion, and the only other character who's ever had a 2 billion berry bounty was Blackbeard after he became an Emperor of the Sea, and even back then his bounty was lower than Loki's. It isn't anymore, Blackbeard's worth almost 4 billion now. But to think that there was a point in very recent history, we're talking Act 1 of Wano recent history, where the world government feared Loki more than Blackbeard. To think that that was a thing is very exciting. Of course, my question is, even if someone were to defeat and turn Loki in, where would the world government possibly plan on imprisoning him? I think that where he is right now may be the only place on this planet possible of containing him. And to explain why, we should definitely talk about this grand tree itself. It was pretty stunning to have this confirmed, but the tree that Loki is bound to is the treasure tree Adam. Because the idea that this Yggdrasil tree was Adam has existed for a long time, at least since 2006 when the tree was first mentioned. So it feels incredibly surreal to finally have it confirmed after almost 2 decades. And just as a refresher, the One Piece world contains 2 legendary Genesis trees. We have the Sunlight Tree Eve, which we've never fully seen, but it's the roots of this tree that provide sunlight to Fishman Island, and the Treasure Tree Adam, which is also known as the Jewel Tree in the official English translation, which Frankie has referred to as the strongest tree in the world. Bit of tree power scaling there, but Frankie has mentioned that there are several of these sorts of trees, but Adam and Eve seem to be these grand trees that practically gave life to large sections of this planet. And actually, in that same chapter, chapter 431, Frankie practically confirms that Adam was on Elbaf, because he described its location as a faraway, war-torn island where people perpetually fight wars, but no matter whether they all die and all of their buildings turn into ruins, this tree always remains. So Adam, in addition to its size, is the perfect location for Elbaf, because it's the one place powerful enough that it cannot be destroyed by even the most devastating of wars. And it's also the most logical place on the planet for endless wars to take place, because the resources that this tree provides are unlike anything else you can find on this planet. And it's also the only structure strong enough to actually contain someone like Loki. The sea stone chains do take away his fruit powers and weaken the fruit users slightly, but if this was a simple tree, then Loki would have no worries breaking through that bad boy. I guarantee that this tree is more secure than all of Impel Down, which, come to think of it, also had a general theme of the underworld. But there are currently 2 pirate ships in the world that have been constructed out of Adam wood, one of which was the Ora Jackson Goldie Rogers vessel, and the other of which is our very own Thousand Sunny, because Frankie used the 200 million berries he stole to buy Adam wood on the black market. So all I'm gonna say is, if there was an arc where the Thousand Sunny maybe got a bit of an upgrade, then maybe, Egghead, not the right arc after all, because we have the strongest materials that we will ever find on this planet right here. And in a way, this is like a homecoming for the Thousand Sunny, as this is essentially where the Thousand Sunny was born. But another surprise in this chapter came in the form of Nico Robin deciding to go very retro on us and reclaim her pre-time skip hairstyle. This is a big deal. But as for why Brooke was the one cutting Robin's hair, there is some logic here. Because we do, surprisingly, have extensive knowledge of Straw Hat hairdressing lore. Originally, it was stated by Oda that Robin and Usopp were the ones responsible for crew haircuts, but Usopp's not here and Robin is the one in need of a haircut. And later on, it was also established that Sanji sometimes covers hairdressing needs, but again, he's not here. And so we turn to Brooke, a man without eyes, to do the cutting of the hair. But I think it makes a lot of sense because his afro shows a great level of care for his hair, and Brooke's also a skilled swordsman, so he'd probably be a lot more precise than Frankie or Jinbei. Although then again, Frankie is not to be underestimated when it comes to hair. He may actually be the most competent hairdresser on the crew. I mean, the dude has turned his hair into both a cannon and a whale, so I'd probably trust him with a fringe. Let's talk about the fringe, specifically why the fringe, because this is, it is ridiculously sweet. As Robin is now anticipating a reunion with Soul, she's going back to the hairstyle that she had as a child, perhaps with a thought that Soul wouldn't recognize her with new hair. And I really like it. Robin is one of the characters who I prefer the pre-time skip look for, hair and everything. And my one wish is that we can now go all the way back and give her a nice cowboy hat as well. Really returning Robin to that Indiana Jones style archaeologist. But because Robin can't have anything nice ever, this chapter ends in the worst possible way with the news that Jaguar D Soul has fallen and cannot get up. Or something along those lines. Ill fortune has fallen upon him, causing Soul himself to fall. And I don't like it. I swear, if this Robin Soul reunion doesn't happen, I will riot, or I will still riot to a lesser degree if this is a situation where Robin only gets to speak to Soul for a few minutes on his deathbed or on his death floor before departing this world and ripping my heart out and tearing it to pieces for a second time. My only solace at the moment is that I don't think Oda would do that. It feels a bit miserable for his writing style outside of flashbacks. So here's what I'm thinking. Saul has fallen unconscious in order to keep him out of the story for a bit. There's something that he knows that we can't have Robin or the Straw Hats finding out about yet because it's not the correct dramatic moment, and Oda needs to find an excuse to stop them communicating. That would be my best guess. I don't think that anything truly horrible is going to happen to Saul at this stage, but I could also be very wrong. Given what Oda did to Bartholomew Kuma, nothing is off the table with beloved father figures of our female cast, but feel free to drop your questions, statements, and theories about this chapter in the comments below.